Welcome back. Former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour used to have a saying, in politics, good gets better and bad gets worse. And while the last couple of weeks is any indication since Election Day, well, we've kind of seen that. The good's gotten a bit better for President Biden, and the bad's gotten a bit worse for former President Trump. Just the last couple of days, President Biden's Democrats expanded their majority in the Senate in Georgia. Raphael Warnock running a similar playbook as the president ran in that state as of this morning. Gas prices are down year over year, major priority for the president. President just accomplished a big foreign policy goal, bringing American Brittany Griner home from Russia. As for President Trump, this has been a stinker of a week, as well as the last month, if you will, for his presidential campaign. It began with Republicans criticizing his outlandish and un-American statement about terminating the Constitution for the 2020 election results. Then saw his hand-picked acolyte Herschel Walker lose handily in the Georgia Senate runoff again. And the week also brought additional legal woes as his company was found guilty in a tax fraud scheme, and additional classified documents were discovered in one of his Florida storage units. So joining me now on set, Meridith McGraw, national political correspondent for Politico, former Maryland Democratic Congresswoman, NBC News political analyst Donna Edwards, and Republican strategist Todd. Meridith, I want to start with Biden, because what I find fascinating about Biden's current state is that his improvement is all here, meaning in Washington. He's got more political capital inside the Democratic Party. He certainly feels as if it feels like his agenda is right. He told the DNC what the calendar is. You know, he gets to make the weather, if you will. But the American public hasn't rewarded him yet. He's still sitting at the same 40 to 45% he's been sitting at since he got inaugurated.
That has been pretty remarkable, that despite all of these wins that he's had, and especially what we saw in the midterm elections, Democrats were, of course, all surprised by how things went with them there. You'd think that you would see a bit of a bump with President Biden, and yet he still has not been able to sell that to the American people so far. As you said, his poll numbers have been pretty stagnant.
You know, I don't know, Donna, is this just polarization in the world we live in now?
Well, maybe, but I do think that 2023 is going to be an up year for Biden, because with a deadlock in the House and then barely in the Senate.
You think having a foil?
No, but I think the judges will get through, and ambassadors will get through, and appointments will get through, and that will keep him on a winning streak. It's also true that for Biden, he'll be able to then start rolling out all of this infrastructure money that's been sitting there, the energy money that's been sitting there, and it's going to look like one win after another, I think, state by state.
You know, it was Trump's trading range was always very narrow. Maybe Biden's trading range, if his approval rating is very narrow. Is that about the two men, or is this about the current, in your view, the current electorate we live in?
I think it's both things. You know, Joe Biden's been around a long time. It's hard to have a new chapter when you've been around as long as he has. And I think we are in a narrow trading range. In many ways, we haven't moved beyond the Wednesday morning after the 2016 election. You know, the states have basically stayed the same, except the ones that were a half point apart.
We've spent $20 billion on campaign ads or so since 2016, and we've moved the needle a couple of inches in either direction a few times.
And,
that's it.
You know, we're now down to only 5 states send a split pair of senators to Washington from split parties, the lowest in the history of our country. We're down to, I think, 22 seats in the House are different from their vote for president, second lowest in the history of our country. I mean, polarization is real. First off, realignment was real, right? This is not the alignment we had for 4 decades, but we have realigned, and we are now fighting over inches for everything.
All right, let me move to Trump and the Republicans. Besides Herschel Walker, who else owns the loss on Herschel Walker? Brad, I'll start with you.
I think the Republican Party owns it on the donor side. You know, I mean, Herschel Walker raised more money than any of the next 3 Republican candidates for Senate and open seats. You got to give him credit for that. It's one of the top 5 or 6 most fundraising successes for a Republican Senate candidate ever. However, Raphael Warnock raised more than twice as much. Our donors have not accepted the fact that we're now in a world where these Senate races are going to cost multiples of what they did 4 or 5 years ago, because there's so few people up for grabs.
So you think this was a winnable race still?
Absolutely.
That Herschel Walker isn't the reason they lost?
Georgia's a winnable state for Republicans. Won more votes in the congressional races in Georgia. It was a winnable state, but you can't leave your candidate with half as much money as his opponent does, and that's what our donors did.
Meridith, do you think if there was financial parity, Walker wins?
I mean, I think the fact that Warnock outraised him by so much was pretty remarkable. But one thing that I reported on was the fact that Republicans are really coming to terms with the fact that they were not pushing the same kind of early voting that Warnock and the Democrats really capitalized on in this runoff election. And part of that, of course, has to do with the former president, who has balked at mail-in voting, who's made his supporters believe that it leads to widespread fraud. And I think there's going to be a lot of soul-searching there for the Republican Party and how they sort of re-educate and deal with voters on that front.
I think that's true. I mean, Republicans have good reasons to not want a lot of early voting, especially mail voting. But early voting in person, especially under Georgia's new law, is very secure. And Republican voters need to take advantage of it. And I think we have to reorient our turnout preparation that way. You know, Florida's a state where Republicans do vote early. And you saw it was a pretty good night for Republicans there. North Carolina this year had more Republicans vote early than ever before. It was a pretty good night for Republicans in North Carolina.
All right, but aren't we dancing around that? I mean, Donna, is it really tactics and money, or is it Donald Trump and Herschel Walker?
Well, I mean, look, almost all of the candidates that Donald Trump endorsed, at least in the statewide races, the Senate races, they lost. But they lost in most instances in very narrow margins. And what that means is that Democrats have to be prepared to contest every single seat, because these races are going to be decided by really slim margins. And I don't think that we can just celebrate the fact that Democrats won. Precisely because it was a narrow victory. If it had been larger, we'd be celebrating, but I don't think we can do that now.
Is a Trump endorsement valuable to a Republican in a swing state?
Well, if it gets you through the primary and you don't make it through the primary otherwise, then yes, it would be valuable.
But if you can't win a general...
But
if you can't win a general, what's it worth?
Well, Ted Budd won a general with his endorsement. And so I think the question you have to... Well, it's still a pretty narrow state, though. You have to win the elections in front of you. And if you have a contested primary, you have to win that primary. Now, you can ask yourself whether we need fewer contested primaries. That's pretty hard to police on the Republican side. But Democrats generally have not had primaries in the last 2 or 3 cycles in Senate races. Republicans have. And it's hurt us. It's hurt us to have
It's obvious, Meridith, right? When Democrats have primaries, they have progressive problems. When Republicans have primaries, they have Trump-right problems.
Yeah, and Republicans really do have Trump-right problems. I think that's been made pretty clear from the get-go. In talking to Republicans, I'm sure a lot of them would have preferred to see Dave McCormick maybe on the ticket instead of...
Dave McCormick wins.
Yeah, but I've listened to a lot of Republicans, especially Senate Republicans, complaining about the candidates and saying that Donald Trump is, interfering. At the same time, those are the candidates who are able to get through these primaries. And until Republicans figure out that problem, I think Democrats are going to be in the catbird seat with candidates who are able to travel through the middle.
Can Trump recover inside the Republican Party? And if so, how does that look? What does that look like?
Well, it would be a very diverse field. It'd have to be a wide field with a splintered vote. I think, our rules favor someone winning with a plurality. We have a lot of states that are winner-take-all. We have a lot of other states that are winner-take-all by congressional districts. And so if you have 4 or 5 candidates, 30% is pretty hard to stop. That's how he got the nomination in 2016. That's what he's hoping for this time. A lot of other Republicans are hoping for a condensed field, like maybe 2.5 candidates total. So maybe someone early to spar with Trump for the next 6 months, and then somebody else who comes in with a freight train.
It's funny you say that. I have a sneaky suspicion we're not going to see a lot of announced candidates before the 4th of July, Meridith.
I think a lot of them are going to be holding off. I don't think conversations are going to be starting until the new year. If you're DeSantis, you want to wait to get through the start of legislation.
I don't know why DeSantis would announce before Labor Day.
Yeah.
At this point,
yeah.
Considering his standing, I just wouldn't make any sense.
And I think for a lot of them too, we've seen over the past 3 weeks how Trump has it's sort of been death by 1,000 paper cuts with a lot of self-inflicted wounds here. And I think a lot of them are waiting to see just how much further things will go.
Yeah, but there doesn't seem to be much separation. Look, in Washington, there is separation, increasing separation from Trump. But on that base, you just look at the vote in Georgia. His base is still with him, and that's a good 30%, and they're not going anywhere.
We also have to spend some time figuring out what we're going to say. I think one problem in this election is Republicans didn't have a coherent agenda that we ran on, other than not Biden, not Democrats. Right. Republicans have to be for some things. That may mean taking some chances. It's conventional wisdom in Washington. Don't say anything if you think it's a good year. That doesn't work in the internet era. You have to have a message.
Everybody needs to learn that. Hillary Clinton learned that the hard way in 2016. Her message was just simply not Trump. And I want to show something else here about this independent problem. Maricopa County put out its final registration numbers in Arizona. And just to show you the power of the independent vote. in Arizona. Republicans had a 9-point advantage on party registration in Maricopa County going into the election. 41% registered Republican, 32% Democrat. Yet, look at this. The Democrat won Maricopa by 2. Kelly won it by 6. Secretary of State by 8. Only the state treasurer was able to carry Maricopa County. That means independents swung 20 to 30 points towards
Trump
the
won
Democrats.
Maricopa County in 2016, too.
Yeah.
You've got to remember. I mean,
16, but not in 20.
Not in 20. It's the largest county, I think, in the country he carried
Yep.
in 2016, and didn't lose by much in 2020.
But isn't this hey, he's toxic to independent voters? The Trump brand is toxic to independents.
In some places, he's a real problem with independent voters, for sure, in the West in particular.
Yeah. Donna?
Well, and in some of these places, especially when you get out into the suburbs where you've got these swing congressional districts, these independent voters are not going for crazy, and they proved that in this election.
Now, it is pretty clear. We may be at 45-45, but the 10% that sits in Arizona and Georgia, my God, are they powerful voters these days. Anyway, Meridith, Donna, and Brad, thank you all.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.